She slept in a half-built house with no doors, no ceiling, and no promises for tomorrow. Every morning she balanced a tray of bananas on her head, walking the burning streets while the world looked straight through her. To most people she was invisible, replaceable, easy to ignore. He, on the other hand, lived behind tinted windows and guarded gates, surrounded by comfort, power, and choices. He had everything except something real. Their paths were never meant to cross. Not in the same city, not in the same lifetime. But one ordinary day, a single decision, refusing money she did not earn, caught the attention of a man who had seen everything money could buy. What happens when dignity meets wealth, and can honesty survive in a world built on greed and class divide? Before the story continues, tell us where you're watching from and what time it is in your country. If you believe stories like this still matter, don't forget to subscribe and stay with us. In the heart of Lagos, where the streets never truly slept, and survival was a daily negotiation with hunger, lived a young woman named Amara Okoye. Long before the city stirred awake, before car horns filled the air and shopkeepers lifted their metal shutters, Amara was already on her feet. Her mornings began in silence. She would step carefully across the dusty floor of the half-built structure she called home. An unfinished house with bare cement walls, no proper doors, and a roof that leaked whenever the sky decided to cry. At night, cold winds slipped through the cracks like an unwanted guest. During the rainy season, puddles formed where dreams should have been. This was where Amara lived with her widowed mother, Mama Nkiru, and her younger sister, Zara. Her father had died years earlier, swallowed by illness and poverty, before he could leave behind anything except responsibility. Since then, Amara had become more than a daughter. She was the backbone of the family, the shield against hunger, the reason the pot still boiled sometimes. Every morning she washed her face with cold water, tied her hair neatly, and balanced a tray of ripe yellow bananas on her head. The bananas were her lifeline. Each one represented a chance, small, fragile, and uncertain. By sunrise, she was already weaving through traffic, her voice rising above the chaos. Fresh bananas. Sweet bananas. The sun was merciless. It pressed down on her skin like punishment, but Amara did not complain. She walked mile after mile, stopping at junctions, outside offices, near bus stops, anywhere someone might spare a few naira. Some people ignored her completely. Others waved her away as if she were a nuisance. A few stared at her with pity, the kind that burned worse than insults. Still she smiled. Not because life was kind, but because she refused to let it break her. Amara never begged. She never exaggerated her pain or told strangers about her struggles. Her mother had raised her with one rule that guided every step she took. Never trade your dignity for survival. If she earned money, it would be through honest work, not sympathy. By late afternoon, her feet often ached and her throat felt dry from calling out all day. When the last banana was sold, or when the sun dipped too low to keep going, she headed home. Her body tired, but her spirit still standing. That evening was no different. She returned to the unfinished house with a small bundle of naira notes folded carefully in her hand. Mama Nkiru sat on a wooden stool near the corner, her face lined with worry and quiet strength. Zara crouched beside her, tracing shapes in the dust with a stick. Amara placed the money on the table. "Mama, today was hard," she said softly, forcing a smile. "But I sold almost everything." Mama Nkiru picked up the money, slowly counting it with practiced fingers. When she finished, her shoulders sagged. "It's not enough for Zara's school fees," she said quietly. "But at least we can eat tonight." Zara looked up, her eyes too old for her age. "I don't mind, sister," she said quickly. "I can stay home for a few days." Amara knelt in front of her, immediately cupping Zara's face. "No," she said firmly. "You will not miss school, not because of money, not because of us." Mama Nkiru reached out and held Amara's hand, her voice trembling. "My daughter, you are trying. You are doing more than anyone should have to do at your age. I just worry. Lagos is not kind to young girls. Amara squeezed her mother's hand and lifted her chin. Mama, as long as I have my hands and my legs, I will work. I will never beg. And I will never let Zara's future end on these streets. That night they ate quietly. A simple meal. No laughter, but no tears either. Poverty had taught them how to survive without dramatics. As darkness fell, Amara lay on the thin mat she shared with her sister, staring up at the unfinished ceiling. Her body was exhausted, but her mind would not rest. How would she raise the school fees in time? She had already been working longer hours, waking earlier, sleeping later. There was nothing left to cut, nothing extra to sell. Yet the deadline was close and the consequences were cruel. Education was Zara's only way out. Amara knew that. That was why fear settled heavy in her chest, not for herself, but for the little girl sleeping beside her, dreaming of a life far from dusty floors and leaking roofs. The next morning, just as Amara was arranging her bananas near the roadside, Zara came running toward her, tears streaming down her face. "Sister," she cried, "they sent me home." Amara's heart dropped. "The teacher said I can't come back until we pay everything." Amara stood frozen for a moment, the noise of the city fading around her. Then she knelt again, wiping her sister's tears. "Zara, listen to me," she said, her voice calm but burning with determination. "You will go back to school. I promise you, no one will stop you from learning." But how Zara whispered, "We barely have food." Amara stood up slowly, her jaw set. "Then I will work harder. I will wake earlier. I will sell more. I will find a way." Mama and Kiru watched them from a distance, tears glistening in her eyes. She knew the weight her daughter carried, and it broke her heart. As Amara stepped back into the busy street that day, balancing the tray of bananas once more, her heart pounded with fear and resolve. She did not know how she would raise the money. She did not know who would help her. But one thing was certain: she would not fail her sister. And somewhere in the same city, a man who had everything was about to notice a woman who had nothing except integrity. The days that followed were heavier than the ones before. Each morning, Amara Okoye returned to the streets with the same tray of bananas, but something inside her had changed. The smile she wore was still polite, still strong, but behind it lived a quiet urgency. Time was no longer just passing, it was closing in. Zara no longer left home with her small backpack and hopeful steps. She stayed behind, sweeping the dusty floor, pretending she was fine. But Amara saw the way her sister lingered near the doorway whenever children in uniforms passed by. She saw how Zara's eyes followed them, how her hands tightened around the broom. That sight hurt more than hunger ever could. On the third day, Amara decided to start earlier than usual. Before dawn, when the sky was still bruised with darkness, she was already on the road. She walked farther than she ever had, moving through unfamiliar streets, chasing every possible customer. Her feet burned, her shoulders ached, but she did not stop. By midday, the sun was unforgiving. Sweat soaked through her clothes and her throat felt raw from calling out. Still, sales were slow. People were distracted, impatient, unwilling to spend on anything that wasn't essential. At one point, a woman stopped, glanced at the bananas, then scoffed. "You again," she said. "Can't you find better work than roaming the streets like this?" Amara swallowed the insult. "Yes, Ma," she replied quietly, offering a bunch anyway. The woman walked away. Moments like that chipped at her strength, but they never broke her resolve. She reminded herself why she was there, why she kept going. By evening, she returned home with barely more money than the day before. Mama Nkiru was waiting, her expression tired but gentle. "How was today?" she asked. Amara placed the money down slowly. "Not good enough," she admitted. Mama Nkiru sighed and sat beside her. "My daughter, maybe. Maybe Zara can wait a term," she said hesitantly. "Many children do." Amara turned sharply, pain flashing in her eyes. "No, Mama," she said. "That's how it starts. First one term, then another, then she never goes back." Mama Nkiru looked away ashamed. "I just don't want to see you suffer like this." Amara reached for her mother's hands. "I would rather suffer now than watch her future disappear." That night, Amara couldn't sleep. She listened to the city breathe, outside cars, passing distant laughter, the hum of generators. In that noise, she made a silent vow. If selling bananas wasn't enough, she would find another way. But whatever she did, she would not compromise who she was. The next morning, fate shifted. Amara had just arranged her bananas near a busy intersection when a sleek black car slowed to a stop nearby. It was out of place, too polished, too quiet among the Danfo buses and motorbikes. A tall man stepped out. He wore a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled neatly, his shoes clean despite the dust. There was confidence in the way he moved, the kind that came from a life without daily fear. People noticed him instantly. Amara noticed too, but only briefly. She had learned not to stare at wealth. It only reminded her of what she didn't have. The man walked straight toward her. "How much for a bunch?" he asked, his voice calm, measured. 600 naira, sir," Amara replied, lifting one bunch. He reached into his pocket and handed her 1,000 naira note. "Keep the change." Amara looked at the note, then back at him. Slowly, she shook her head. "No, sir," she said. "Please take another bunch." The man paused, surprised. "I said keep it. I can't," she replied, already picking another bunch. "I didn't earn it." He raised an eyebrow, clearly not used to being refused. "You're serious?" "Yes, sir." He studied her for a moment, as if trying to understand what he was seeing. "Most people wouldn't think twice," he said. Amara met his gaze steadily. "My mother taught me that money without honesty leaves you empty. I work for what I earn." For the first time that day, the man smiled, not politely, but with genuine curiosity. "Interesting," he said, taking the extra bananas. "Thank you." He walked back to his car, but his mind stayed behind. Something about the young woman lingered. In a city where desperation often spoke louder than values, her refusal stood out. Amara watched the car drive away, unaware that she had just crossed paths with someone who would change her life. The following morning, the same car returned. This time, Amara noticed. The man stepped out again, his presence just as commanding. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning, sir. I'll take bananas again." She handed him a bunch. 600 naira. Once again, he offered 1,000. "Keep the change." Amara sighed softly. "Sir, if you want to help someone, please help someone who truly needs it," she said. "But I can't take what I didn't work for." That answer stirred something deeper in him. Over the next few days, he kept coming back. Sometimes he bought bananas. Sometimes he just stood nearby watching. He observed how Amara treated every customer with respect. How she never cheated, never complained, never begged, even when business was bad. One evening, as she packed up, he finally asked her name. "Amara," she said. "I'm Daniel Adewale," he replied. She nodded politely, not knowing or caring that he was one of the youngest billionaires in the city. "Why do you work like this?" he asked. "You could ask for help." Amara looked out at the street before answering. "Because asking for help is easy," she said. "But earning your way keeps your soul intact." Daniel nodded slowly. "You are rare," he said. Amara smiled faintly. "I'm just doing what's right." As Daniel drove away that night, a thought settled firmly in his mind. He had seen wealth, beauty, ambition, but integrity like hers was uncommon. And without knowing it, Amara's quiet honesty had just begun to unlock doors she never imagined existed. By the end of that week, Daniel Adewale found himself doing something he had never done before. He was rearranging his schedule. Meetings could wait. Calls could be postponed. Contracts worth millions were signed every month. Yet his thoughts kept drifting back to a narrow roadside in Lagos, where a young woman sold bananas with quiet dignity. Amara, on the other hand, did not expect to see him again. She stood at her usual spot that morning, adjusting the tray on her head, mentally calculating how many bunches she would need to sell to move even one step closer to Zara's school fees. The city roared around her, uncaring and relentless. Then the black car appeared again. This time it stopped closer than before. Daniel stepped out, his movements unhurried. He wore simpler clothes now, no sharp suit, no polished arrogance, yet his presence still drew attention. People noticed him. They always did. Amara glanced up briefly, recognition flickering across her face. She nodded politely and went back to arranging her bananas. "Good morning, Amara," Daniel said. "Good morning, sir." He smiled. "You remember my name?" "You told me," she replied simply. That answer pleased him more than he expected. He bought 2 bunches this time, paid the exact amount, and stood there longer than necessary. Amara waited patiently, accustomed to customers who lingered with no real intention. "Is business always this hard?" he asked. Amara hesitated. She was not one to complain, but something about his tone felt sincere. "Some days are better than others," she said. "But hunger doesn't wait for good days." Daniel nodded slowly. "And your sister?" he asked. "Is she back in school?" The question caught her off guard. Amara's fingers tightened around the tray. "Not yet," she admitted. "But she will be." Daniel studied her face. There was no bitterness in her voice, no self-pity, only quiet determination. "You don't sound afraid," he said. "I am," she replied honestly. "But fear doesn't pay fees." That answer stayed with him long after he left. Over the following days, Daniel returned again and again, not just to buy bananas, but to understand the woman behind them. He watched how Amara interacted with the world, how she greeted people politely even when they ignored her, how she counted her money carefully, setting aside small notes for home before thinking of anything else. He noticed how children gravitated toward her, how older women respected her. Even men who tried to tease her were met with calm firmness, never encouragement. She carried herself like someone who knew her worth, even when the world treated her like she had none. One afternoon, rain threatened the sky. Dark clouds rolled in quickly and traders scrambled to pack up. Amara stayed covering her bananas with a worn plastic sheet, determined to sell a little more before leaving. Daniel pulled up and watched her struggle with the wind. "You should go home," he said gently. "If I go now, I lose today's money," she replied, her voice strained. Without asking, Daniel held one corner of the plastic sheet while she secured the other. For a brief moment, their hands brushed. Amara pulled back immediately, startled not by his touch, but by how unfamiliar kindness felt. "Thank you," she said softly. Daniel stepped back, aware of the boundary she had drawn. That evening, he made a decision. The next day, he arrived earlier than usual. "Amara," he said after paying for bananas, "can I ask you something?" She nodded cautiously. "You work harder than anyone I know," he continued. "But hard work alone doesn't always change things. Would you consider another kind of opportunity?" Amara frowned. "What kind?" "I need someone in my house," Daniel said carefully. "Someone I can trust. The pay is steady, enough to help with your sister's school fees." The street seemed to fall silent. Amara stared at him, her heart pounding. A job like that could solve everything or ruin everything. "Why me?" she asked. "Because I trust you," he replied without hesitation. She looked away, conflicted. Rich men made promises easily and paid the price later, women like her. "I need time," she said finally. Daniel nodded. "Of course. But remember, opportunities don't always knock twice." That night, Amara sat beside her mother, torn between hope and fear. "Mama," she said, "what if this man is different?" Mama Nkiru studied her daughter's face. "Different how? He respects me," Amara said. "But he is rich, and rich men don't live in our world." Mama Nkiru sighed. "We pray, then we decide," she said. "Never move out of desperation alone." They prayed quietly, asking for clarity rather than miracles. The next morning, Amara found Daniel waiting. "I'll take the job," she said. Daniel's relief was visible. "I promise you," he said, "you won't regret it." But neither of them knew what awaited Amara beyond those gates. When she arrived at the mansion for the first time, her breath caught in her throat. The house stood tall and pristine, everything she was not. And standing at the entrance, dressed in an expensive gown, was a woman whose eyes burned with instant hostility. "So this is her," the woman said coldly. Daniel sighed. "Amara, this is Lydia," he said, "my fiancée." Lydia looked Amara up and down, lips curling. "A banana seller," she scoffed. "Interesting choice." Amara lowered her gaze, swallowing her pride. "Yes, Ma." "Remember your place," Lydia said sharply. "This house has rules." Amara nodded. She had faced hunger. She had faced humiliation. She told herself she could face this too. But as Lydia turned away with a satisfied smirk, Daniel felt something twist painfully in his chest. For the first time, he wondered if bringing Amara into this world had been an act of kindness, or the beginning of a deeper injustice. Amara's first full week inside the Adawale mansion felt longer than all the months she had spent walking the streets with bananas on her head. The house was quiet in a way that made her uneasy. Not the peaceful kind of quiet she imagined wealthy people enjoyed, but a tense silence that carried unspoken rules and watchful eyes. Every step she took felt measured. Every movement felt judged. Lydia, Daniel's fiancée, wasted no time establishing control. "You will clean the floors every morning," she said on Amara's first day, her voice sharp and deliberate. "Wash the dishes immediately after meals. Iron my clothes properly. And do not touch anything that does not belong to you." "Yes, Ma," Amara replied calmly. Lydia circled her, slowly inspecting her like an object. "And don't mistake kindness for weakness," Lydia added. "I don't tolerate mistakes." Amara nodded again, her face unreadable. Inside, she reminded herself why she was there. Zara's education, her family's survival. Pride could wait, integrity could not. She worked quietly, efficiently, never complaining even when tasks were doubled, or instructions deliberately unclear. When Lydia spilled juice on the freshly cleaned floor and demanded it be wiped immediately, Amara did so without argument. When Lydia criticized her cooking without tasting it, Amara apologized and tried again. Daniel noticed everything. From his study upstairs, he watched how Amara moved through the house, never lazy, never careless, never resentful. He noticed how Lydia's voice changed whenever Amara entered the room, sharper, colder. And he noticed how Amara never responded with anger. It unsettled him. One afternoon, Daniel decided to test something he had been thinking about since the market. He called Amara into the living room. "There's money missing from my wallet," he said casually, watching her closely. Amara froze for a fraction of a second, not in fear, but in surprise. "I'm sorry, sir," she said carefully. "I haven't touched your wallet." Daniel studied her face. There was no panic, no defensive tone, just calm truth. "I know," he said after a pause. "I just wanted to see your reaction." Amara met his gaze steadily. "Sir," she said, choosing her words with care, "if I ever touch money that isn't mine, you should send me away immediately." Daniel felt something tighten in his chest. That evening, Lydia tried her own test. She left a bundle of cash deliberately on the kitchen counter and watched from the doorway. Amara noticed it while cleaning. She stopped, stared at it for a moment, then folded a cloth and covered the money neatly. When Lydia returned later and accused her sharply, "Where is my money?" Amara lifted the cloth calmly. "Here, Ma." I covered it so it wouldn't get wet. Lydia's eyes narrowed. You didn't think of taking it? No, Ma. And why not? Lydia pressed, her voice edged with suspicion. Amara answered softly, because it isn't mine. Lydia scoffed and walked away, frustrated. Each test only confirmed what Daniel already knew. Amara's honesty wasn't situational. It wasn't performative. It was deeply rooted. Yet despite her integrity, the house remained hostile. One night, while carrying a heavy basket of laundry down the corridor, Amara nearly lost her balance. Before she could fall, a hand steadied the basket. Careful, a voice said. She looked up startled and met the eyes of Kola, Daniel's closest friend. I'm fine, she said quickly. Thank you, sir. He smiled gently. Please don't call me sir, he said. Just Kola. He took the basket from her hands effortlessly. You shouldn't carry this alone. I can manage, Amara insisted, but he had already started walking. As they moved toward the laundry room, Kola glanced at her. You're strong, he said. But strength doesn't mean you must suffer in silence. Amara lowered her eyes. I'm used to it. Kola stopped walking and turned to face her. You shouldn't be. His words stayed with her longer than he knew. Unlike Lydia, Kola treated her like a human being. He asked how her day was. He listened when she spoke. Sometimes he defended her, subtly questioning Lydia's unreasonable demands without confrontation. For the first time since entering the house, Amara felt a small sense of relief. But Lydia noticed. An insecurity once awakened never slept quietly. A few days later, Lydia's anger found its moment. She stormed into the living room holding an empty hanger. Where is my red designer dress? She demanded. Amara looked up from her cleaning, confused. I don't know, Ma. Lydia's eyes flashed. Don't lie to me. You took it? I didn't, Amara said firmly. I would never steal. Before Amara could say another word, Lydia raised her hand and slapped her hard across the cheek. The sound echoed through the house. Amara staggered but did not fall. She did not cry out. She simply stood there, stunned, her cheek burning, her dignity wounded but intact. At that moment, Daniel walked in. What is going on? He asked, his voice low and dangerous. She stole my dress, Lydia cried, instantly shifting into the role of victim. I told you bringing a street girl into this house was a mistake. Daniel turned to Amara. He saw the red mark on her cheek. He saw the quiet restraint in her eyes. Did you steal anything? He asked calmly. No, Amara replied. I didn't. Daniel nodded once. Where is your proof? He asked Lydia. Lydia hesitated. I don't need proof. Look at her. Daniel's voice hardened. I am looking at her. And I see someone who has refused free money on the street, someone who has passed every test of honesty in this house. Lydia stared at him in disbelief. You're choosing her over me. I'm choosing the truth, Daniel said. And I won't allow cruelty under my roof. Silence fell. Pack your things, Lydia, Daniel said finally. You need to leave. Lydia laughed bitterly. For her, for my peace. She turned to Amara with venom in her eyes. You think you've won, she hissed. You're nothing. Don't forget that. Amara said nothing. She didn't need to. Her silence carried more dignity than Lydia's insults ever could. When Lydia stormed out, the house felt lighter, as though something toxic had been removed. Daniel turned to Amara. Are you okay? She touched her cheek gently and nodded. I've been through worse. Daniel exhaled, deeply shaken. In that moment, he realized something that changed everything. Amara wasn't just honest. She was unbreakable. And for the first time in his life, Daniel Adewale understood that real strength didn't come from wealth, power, or control, but from integrity that refused to bend even under cruelty. After Lydia left the mansion that night, silence settled in. But it was no longer hostile. It was reflective. Daniel Adewale stood alone in his study long after the door had slammed shut behind his former fiancée. The city lights outside his window blinked steadily, indifferent to the shift that had just taken place inside his home. For the first time in years, the house felt honest. Yet honesty came with discomfort. He replayed everything in his mind, the way Lydia had spoken to Amara, the ease with which cruelty had lived in his home. Without his full awareness and the moment he had chosen truth over familiarity. Ending an engagement was not a small thing, especially for a man whose life had always been guided by strategy and public perception. But when he closed his eyes, all he could see was Amara standing silently, her cheek marked, her pride unbroken. Downstairs, Amara sat alone in the kitchen, rinsing plates she had already cleaned twice. Her hands moved automatically, but her thoughts were far away. She had expected consequences, being sent away, blamed, humiliated further. Instead, the storm had turned in a direction she had never imagined. She was grateful. But she was also afraid. Rich men made decisions quickly, she knew, and just as quickly they could change them. That night she barely slept. The following days brought visible changes. Daniel became quieter, more observant. He paid attention to the house in ways he never had before, how the staff moved, how instructions were given, how power had been exercised without accountability. For the first time, he began to question not just Lydia but himself. Amara, meanwhile, continued her work as she always had. She rose early, cleaned thoroughly, cooked with care, and spoke only when spoken to. She did not assume that Lydia's departure had improved her standing. Experience had taught her that peace was often temporary. One morning, Daniel stopped her as she was arranging the dining table. "Amara," he said, hesitating slightly, "you don't have to call me sir anymore." She looked up, surprised. "Yes, Daniel," she said cautiously. He nodded, satisfied. "I want this house to feel safe," he added, "for everyone in it." She bowed her head slightly. "Thank you." Their conversations remained brief, respectful, careful. Neither crossed lines, neither acknowledged the shift happening quietly between them. But Kola noticed. Daniel's closest friend had been coming around more often since Lydia's departure, offering support without prying. He saw how Daniel's eyes followed Amara, not with desire alone, but with concern, curiosity, and something deeper. One afternoon, as Amara carried groceries in from the car, Kola stepped in to help her. "You don't have to do everything yourself," he said lightly. "I'm used to it," she replied. He smiled, but there was sadness behind it. "I know." They walked together toward the kitchen, the air between them calm. "You handled everything with grace," Kola said after a moment. "Not many people would." Amara shrugged gently. "When you grow up with nothing, you learn which battles to fight." Kola studied her face, and which ones not to. She nodded. That evening, as Amara prepared dinner, Daniel watched her from the doorway. The way she moved, quiet, intentional, unassuming, brought a warmth into the house that had been missing for a long time. He found himself lingering, wanting to speak, but unsure how. "Dinner will be ready soon," she said without turning. "I know," he replied. "Take your time." There was a pause. "Amara," he began, then stopped. She turned, waiting. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry," he said finally, "for what you went through. I should have seen it sooner." She met his gaze. "You saw it when it mattered," she said. "That's enough." Her forgiveness was quiet, unassuming, but it struck him harder than any accusation could have. Later that night, Daniel lay awake, staring at the ceiling. He had always believed that wealth gave him control over outcomes, over people, over emotions. But Amara challenged that belief. She could not be bought, intimidated, or molded, and that unsettled him in the most honest way. Across the city, Amara's mother, Mama Nkiru, sat awake as well, praying softly. She sensed change coming, though she didn't know what shape it would take. She prayed not for riches, but for protection for her daughter's heart and for wisdom. The next morning, Daniel made a decision. He called Amara into the living room and handed her an envelope. She froze. "What is this?" she asked carefully. "Zara's school fees," he said simply. "For the year." Her hands trembled as she stared at the envelope. "I can't," she began. "This is not charity," he said gently. "It's support, and it's earned." Tears welled in her eyes, but she fought them back. "Thank you," she whispered. "Promise me something," Daniel said. "Yes, go back to school too," he said. "Finish what you started." Her breath caught. I will." In that moment, something shifted permanently. But change rarely came without cost. Word of Lydia's departure spread quickly in their social circles. Questions followed, assumptions formed. Whispers began about Daniel, about the house, about Amara. Some were kind, many were not. Amara felt it when drivers stared too long, when visitors looked at her differently. She knew what they were thinking. She had lived with judgment her entire life. But Daniel felt it too, and for the first time he cared. He realized that choosing integrity over image came with consequences, and he was willing to face them. Because somewhere between the streets of Lagos and the quiet halls of his mansion, Daniel Adewale had begun to understand something life had never taught him before. Real wealth was not what you owned. It was who you protected when it mattered most. And Amara Okoye had become someone worth protecting, not because she was weak, but because she was rare. The offer changed everything, but not in the way Amara expected. After Daniel paid Zara's school fees and encouraged her to return to her own education, life inside the mansion entered a new phase. It was quieter, steadier, yet heavier with meaning. Gratitude filled Amara's chest, but so did caution. She had learned long ago that generosity, when misunderstood, could become a chain. She continued her duties with the same discipline as before. Dawn still found her awake. Floors still shone beneath her careful hands. Meals were prepared on time, measured and thoughtful. If Daniel noticed a difference, it was not in her work, but in her silence. She spoke less now, guarded her expressions, and kept a careful distance. Daniel sensed it. One evening he asked her to sit in the living room, not as an order, an invitation. "Amara," he said, choosing his words with care, "I want to talk about your role here." Her heart tightened. She folded her hands neatly on her lap. "Yes, you came here as help," he continued. "But you've become more than that. You've brought order, trust, a kind of calm this house didn't have." She lowered her gaze. "I'm just doing my job." "I want to make it official," Daniel said. "A proper contract, fair pay, defined hours, time for your studies, and autonomy." Amara looked up, startled. "You mean I wouldn't be on call all the time?" "Exactly," he replied. "You deserve boundaries." She hesitated. This was more than she had imagined, more than she had ever asked for. "I need to think," she said honestly. "Take all the time you need," Daniel said. "No pressure." That night, Amara returned home to Mama Nkiru and Zara with a weight on her shoulders. The unfinished house felt smaller than usual, the cracks louder. She listened as Zara recounted her day at school, the joy in her voice cutting through Amara's doubts like light through fog. Later, when Zara slept, Amara spoke quietly to her mother. "Mama," she said, "what if accepting more means losing myself?" Mama Nkiru studied her daughter's face, the lines of worry, the strength beneath. "My child," she said gently, "there is a difference between help that lifts you and help that traps you. The first gives you wings. The second takes your voice." Amara nodded. "The question," her mother continued, "is whether you trust the man offering it." Amara thought of Daniel's eyes, not demanding, not possessive. Thought of the apology he offered without excuses. Thought of the way he asked, not ordered. "I think," I do, she said. The next morning, Amara accepted the contract. From that day on, the lines in the house shifted. She worked defined hours. She attended evening classes. Daniel ensured transportation and study materials, but he never hovered. He never reminded her of what he had done. He let the help stand on its own. The staff noticed. So did Kola. "You're different lately," Kola said one afternoon as they walked through the garden. "How so?" Amara asked. "Lighter," he replied. "Like you're standing on your own ground." She smiled faintly. "I am." Kola watched her with quiet admiration. He had seen many people stumble when offered opportunity, either shrinking under it or clinging too tightly. Amara did neither. She took it with care, with balance. Over time, their conversations grew more natural. Kola spoke of his work, his travels, the pressure of expectations. Amara spoke of school, of her dreams to work in community education to help children like Zara who stood on the edge of falling through cracks. "You think big," Kola said once. "I think necessary," she replied. It was during one of these conversations that Kola realized something uncomfortable. He liked her. Not for her story, not for her resilience, but for who she was, when she laughed softly, when she challenged him, when she refused to see herself as lesser. The realization came with restraint. That evening, Kola found Daniel in the study, staring at documents he wasn't reading. "You're quiet," Kola said. Daniel sighed. "I'm trying to do things right." Kola smiled knowingly. "That's new for you." Daniel leaned back. "I don't want to confuse gratitude with expectation, or help with control." Kola nodded. "Then you're already ahead." Weeks passed. Amara's days were full: work, study, family. She moved between worlds with careful steps, never forgetting where she came from, never pretending she had arrived somewhere she hadn't earned. One night, as she prepared to leave for home, Kola stopped her at the door. "Amara," he said, his tone different. She turned. "Yes," he took a breath. "I need to be honest with you." Her posture stilled. "I've come to care about you," he said, "more than a friend should." She felt a familiar tightening in her chest. "Sadness, gratitude, responsibility." "Kola," she said gently, "you've been kind to me, and I respect you deeply." But he asked softly, "But my heart is not free in that way," she continued. "I don't want to mislead you." Kola nodded, disappointment flickering, but not bitterness. "I suspected," he said. "I just needed to say it." "I'm sorry," she whispered. He smiled. "Don't be. Honesty is a gift." They stood in silence for a moment, then Kola stepped aside, opening the door. "Go," he said. "Your future is waiting." As Amara walked into the night, relief and guilt mingled within her. She had been truthful. That mattered. Inside the mansion, Daniel watched from the window as she left, unaware of the conversation that had just taken place. He felt a pull he didn't yet have words for, a growing certainty that Amara's presence was reshaping him in ways he hadn't anticipated. Not through dependency, but through choice. And in that quiet realization, Daniel understood that offering opportunity was only the beginning. What mattered most was what Amara would build with it on her own terms. If Amara had believed that accepting the contract would erase the quiet wounds of the past, she quickly learned otherwise. Respect on paper did not immediately translate to respect in reality. Even after Lydia's departure, echoes of her presence lingered in the mansion. Unspoken rules, suspicious glances, and a social hierarchy that placed Amara firmly at the bottom. Some staff adjusted easily, following Daniel's clear instructions. Others complied outwardly while holding on to silent resentment. To them, Amara was still the girl from the street. She felt it in the way conversations stopped when she entered a room, in the way instructions were repeated as if she might not understand, in the way visitors assumed she was invisible, speaking over her as though she were furniture. Amara absorbed it all quietly. Each morning she left home early, making sure Mama Nkiru and Zara had eaten before she stepped out. Zara's laughter had returned now that she was back in school, and that alone gave Amara strength. No matter what awaited her inside those gates, she reminded herself why she endured. The mansion was spotless, but emotional messes were harder to clean. One afternoon during a small gathering Daniel hosted for business associates, Amara moved through the room serving drinks. She kept her head low, her movements precise. But one woman, elegantly dressed, sharp-eyed, stopped her abruptly. "Wait," the woman said. "You there?" Amara turned politely. "Yes, ma." The woman studied her closely, then smirked. "Daniel hires girls like you now," she said loudly, not bothering to lower her voice. "Times must be changing." A few guests chuckled awkwardly. Amara felt the familiar heat rise in her chest. She kept her voice steady. "I'm here to work, ma," she replied. The woman waved her hand dismissively. "Of course. Just make sure you don't mistake this place for your own." Amara nodded and walked away, her back straight. Daniel noticed. Later he pulled her aside. "You handled that well." "It's not my place to educate people," Amara said calmly. He frowned. "It is my place to protect you." "I don't need protection," she said gently. "I need fairness." That answer stayed with him. As days passed, Amara learned the subtle rules of the wealthy world she now navigated. She learned which doors were never meant for her, even when open, which smiles were polite and which were dangerous. She learned that humiliation in rich spaces was often quiet and well-dressed. One evening, exhaustion caught up with her. She had spent the entire day cleaning, studying, and cooking. As she carried a tray down the hallway, her foot caught on the edge of a rug. The tray tilted and a glass shattered on the marble floor. The sound echoed. One of the senior house staff rushed in. "Do you know how expensive that glass was?" the woman snapped. "I'm sorry," Amara said, immediately kneeling to clean it up. "This is why people like you shouldn't be trusted with fine things." Amara paused, not because of the insult, but because of the truth behind it. She finished cleaning without another word. That night she sat alone in her small room, staring at her books without reading. The weight of being constantly watched, constantly judged, pressed down on her chest. For the first time since she had left the streets, she cried quietly. Not from regret, from fatigue. The next morning, Kola found her in the garden, sitting still. "You look tired," he said. "I am," she admitted. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone here," he said gently. Amara smiled faintly. "That's where you're wrong. I prove it every day to myself." Kola nodded, respecting that. Despite the hardships, Amara never allowed bitterness to take root. She continued her studies, often late into the night. She listened attentively in class, asking questions, absorbing knowledge like water after drought. Education was her anchor. Daniel noticed her discipline. He noticed the way she balanced gratitude with independence. But he also noticed the toll it took. One evening he knocked on her door, something he rarely did. "Amara," he said when she opened it, "you don't need to carry everything alone." She met his gaze. "I know." "Then let me help," he said. She shook her head gently. "You already have. Let me do the rest." Her strength humbled him. As weeks passed, whispers outside the house grew louder. Friends questioned Daniel's decisions. Some accused him of being reckless. Others hinted at motives that had nothing to do with respect. Amara heard the rumors too. She felt their weight whenever she walked through public spaces with Daniel nearby. Eyes followed. Assumptions formed. One afternoon, Zara asked innocently, "Sister, are people angry because you work for a rich man?" Amara knelt and held her hands. "People fear what they don't understand," she said. "But we don't live our lives for fear." That night, Mama and Kiru held Amara's hands tightly. "You are walking a difficult road," she said, "but you are walking it with truth." That was enough. The days of humiliation did not end suddenly. They faded slowly as consistency replaced suspicion, as Amara's character spoke louder than whispers, as staff began to trust her judgment, as Daniel enforced fairness without favoritism. But those early days left their mark. They taught Amara something crucial. Wealth could change circumstances, but it could not change who people were inside. And as she continued to stand firm, unbowed, unbroken, Amara Okoye learned that dignity was not something anyone could give or take away. It was something she carried with her, always. The change did not come all at once. It arrived quietly in moments so small that Amara almost missed them. It began with trust. After weeks of watching her consistency, how she handled tasks without cutting corners, how she spoke with honesty even when silence would have been safer, some of the staff began to relax around her. Instructions softened. Conversations no longer stopped abruptly when she entered a room. It wasn't friendship yet, but it was no longer hostility, and in that slow shift, one person remained constant. Kola. He never announced his kindness. He never made grand gestures. Instead, he noticed details others ignored. When Amara stayed up late studying, he reminded the staff to keep the house quiet. When her workload grew heavy, he questioned it casually, never accusing, never humiliating anyone in front of others. "Is this necessary?" he would ask, his tone calm but firm. Most times it worked. One evening, as Amara struggled with a stack of books and laundry, Kola appeared beside her. "Let me take that," he said. "I can manage," she replied automatically. "I know," he smiled, "but you don't have to." She hesitated, then handed him the books. "Thank you." They walked together down the hallway, their steps unhurried. "You remind me of someone," Kola said suddenly. "Who?" Amara asked. "My mother," he replied. "She raised 4 children after my father died. She never complained, never begged. She believed dignity was louder than noise." Amara felt something soften in her chest. "She sounds like a strong woman." "She was," he said. "She still is." In moments like that, Amara felt seen not as a project, not as a symbol of charity, but as a person. Meanwhile, Daniel watched these interactions from a distance. He noticed the ease with which Amara spoke to Kola, the way her shoulders relaxed around him. And though there was no jealousy in Daniel's heart, there was awareness. He realized that Amara was not isolated anymore. She was building her own support on her own terms. That mattered. One afternoon, Daniel returned home earlier than usual. He found Amara in the dining area, books spread out, deeply focused. She didn't notice him at first. "What are you studying?" he asked gently. She looked up, startled, then smiled faintly. "Community development," she replied. "I want to work with families like mine, prevent children from dropping out of school." Daniel nodded slowly. "That's admirable. It's necessary," she said. "People don't fall behind because they're lazy. They fall behind because no one intervenes early." Her words echoed in him long after he left the room. Later that evening, Kola found Daniel sitting alone in the living room. "You're thinking too hard," Kola said, dropping onto the couch. Daniel smiled slightly. "Is it that obvious? You've been quiet," Kola replied. "Which usually means you're questioning something." Daniel leaned back. "I'm questioning myself." Kola raised an eyebrow. "That's new." "I brought Amara into this house to help," Daniel continued, "but I don't want her to feel like she owes me her life." Kola studied him carefully. "She doesn't," he said. "That's the point. She's not surviving on your generosity. She's growing because of her discipline." Daniel exhaled. "That's what scares me." Kola smiled knowingly. "Power doesn't frighten you. Independence does." Daniel didn't deny it. Days later, something unexpected happened. Kola asked Amara to walk with him in the garden. She sensed the shift in his tone immediately. "What is it?" she asked softly. He took a deep breath. Amara. I don't want to misunderstand myself, he said carefully, and I don't want to mislead you. Her heart tightened, but she listened. I've come to care about you, he continued. Not because of where you came from, not because of what you've endured, but because of who you are. Silence stretched between them. Amara closed her eyes briefly, gathering her thoughts. Kola, she said gently, you are a good man, and you've been kind to me in ways I'll never forget. He nodded, already sensing what was coming. But my heart doesn't belong in that place, she continued. Not with you. Kola smiled sadly. I thought so, he said. I just needed the truth. I'm sorry, she whispered. He shook his head. Don't be. You respected me enough to be honest. They stood there quietly, the moment passing without bitterness. Later that night, Kola sat alone staring at the city lights. The rejection stung, but it did not wound his pride. He understood something important. Amara's honesty was not selective. It was who she was. Inside the mansion, Daniel noticed Kola's mood shift. You're quiet, Daniel said. I'll be fine, Kola replied. Some things are meant to be felt, not fixed. Daniel studied him, then nodded. As weeks passed, Amara's life continued to find balance. Zara thrived in school. Mama and Kiru slept more peacefully. Amara herself began to breathe easier. One evening, while preparing dinner, she felt someone watching her. She turned and met Daniel's gaze. Is something wrong? She asked. No, he said softly. I was just thinking. About what? About how this house feels different now. She smiled. Change does that. He hesitated, then said, You did that. She shook her head. I just showed up as myself. That answer stayed with him. Daniel realized then that Amara's presence had shifted more than the mood of the house. It had exposed truths about power, about respect, about what it meant to truly help someone without owning them. And for Amara, the presence of a genuine friend, someone who asked nothing, expected nothing, became the first real light she had felt in a long time. Not the blinding light of wealth, but the steady glow of dignity seen and acknowledged. The calm that settled over the mansion did not last. It never did. Just when Amara began to believe that consistency could silence suspicion, jealousy found a new voice, one far more dangerous than open cruelty. Lydia may have left the house, but she had not left the story. Pride rarely walked away quietly. It returned disguised as coincidence. One afternoon, Daniel hosted a small gathering, nothing formal, just a few associates passing through the city. Amara moved through the house with practiced ease, preparing refreshments, keeping to the background. She had learned how to exist in rich spaces without drawing attention, but attention found her anyway. While clearing the guest room after the visitors left, she noticed an expensive silk scarf draped carelessly on the armchair. She folded it neatly and placed it on the dresser, exactly where lost items were usually kept. She did not know that someone was watching. Later that evening, Lydia arrived unannounced. She stood in the living room dressed impeccably, her expression calm but her eyes sharp. Daniel froze when he saw her. "What are you doing here?" he asked. "I came to collect the rest of my things," Lydia replied smoothly. "I didn't think I needed permission." Daniel hesitated, then nodded. "Make it quick." Amara stood quietly near the hallway, her presence immediately irritating Lydia. "Oh," Lydia said, feigning surprise, "you're still here." "Yes, ma," Amara replied calmly. Lydia smiled thinly and disappeared into the guest room. Minutes later, her scream cut through the house. Daniel, everyone rushed toward the sound. Lydia emerged holding the silk scarf, her face twisted with fury. "This was stolen," she said loudly. "And I know who did it." She pointed directly at Amara. The room went silent. "I didn't steal anything," Amara said immediately. Her voice was steady, but her heart raced. "Don't lie," Lydia snapped. "I saw you in the guest room earlier. I was cleaning," Amara replied. I placed it on the dresser. Convenient story, Lydia scoffed. You think because you fooled him, you can fool everyone. Daniel stepped forward. Enough. Where is your proof? Lydia laughed sharply. Proof? Look at her. You really think someone like her wouldn't steal? The words hit like stones. Amara felt the familiar weight press against her chest, the assumption, the judgment, the unspoken verdict passed before any facts. Before she could speak again, Lydia raised her hand and struck her across the face. The sound echoed. Amara staggered but did not fall. Her cheek burned, her vision blurred, but she did not cry out. Daniel's voice dropped dangerously calm. That's enough. Lydia turned to him indignant. She deserves it. No, he said coldly. You don't get to decide that. He turned to Amara. Did you take it? No, she replied. I didn't. Daniel nodded once. I believe you. Lydia stared at him in disbelief. You're choosing her again. I'm choosing truth, Daniel said. And evidence. He turned to the staff. Check the security footage. Lydia's confidence wavered just slightly. Minutes later, the truth surfaced. The footage showed Lydia entering the guest room earlier that afternoon, placing the scarf on the chair herself. The accusation unraveled in real time. Silence followed. Daniel turned to Lydia, his disappointment heavier than anger. You tried to humiliate her, he said. In my home. Lydia's composure cracked. She doesn't belong here, she shouted. She's nothing. Amara stood silently, her face still, her dignity intact. Daniel's decision was immediate. Leave, he said. Now. You're throwing me away for a house help, Lydia screamed. For my peace, Daniel replied. And my conscience. She turned to Amara one last time, venom dripping from every word. This isn't over. Amara said nothing. She didn't need to. When Lydia finally left, the house felt different, lighter, quieter, as though something poisonous had been removed. Daniel turned to Amara. Are you hurt? She touched her cheek gently. I'll be fine. I'm sorry, he said. I should have protected you sooner. You did, she replied, when it mattered. That night, Amara sat alone in her room, replaying everything. The accusation, the slap, the public judgment. She felt the familiar urge to shrink, to disappear. But she didn't. Instead, she stood up and looked at her reflection. She had survived worse, and she had done it without losing herself. Downstairs, Daniel sat awake, shaken. He realized that wealth had shielded him from cruelty, but it had also blinded him to it. Amara had lived in its path her entire life. He made a silent promise. No one under his roof would ever be humiliated again, not for being poor, not for being honest, not for being unseen. And as the night settled, both of them understood that this moment, painful and raw, had changed everything. Not because love had been confessed, but because justice had been chosen. Morning came softly after the storm, but nothing felt the same. Amara woke before dawn, as she always did, yet her body felt heavier than usual. The events of the previous night replayed in her mind, not as sharp pain anymore, but as a dull reminder of how easily dignity could be attacked and how rare it was to be defended. She washed her face, touched the faint bruise on her cheek, and steadied herself. Life did not pause for injustice. It moved forward whether one was ready or not. Downstairs, Daniel Adewale had not slept at all. He sat in the living room long after sunrise, staring at nothing. The house, once a symbol of success and control, now felt like a mirror reflecting everything he had ignored. For years he had believed cruelty only lived in loud places, in poverty, in desperation, in chaos. But it had lived quietly in his home. And he had allowed it. When Amara entered the room to begin her work, Daniel stood immediately. Amara, he said, his voice low. Please sit. She hesitated, then obeyed. I want to speak openly, he continued. Not as your employer, as a man who owes you an apology. She looked up surprised. "You should never have been touched," Daniel said. "Not here, not anywhere. And the fact that it happened under my roof is something I take responsibility for." Amara listened quietly. "You didn't raise your voice," he continued. "You didn't insult anyone. You didn't defend yourself with anger. And still you were hurt." She nodded slowly. "That's not strength," Daniel said. "That's injustice." Amara chose her words carefully. "Sir Daniel," she corrected herself, "I didn't stay silent because I was weak. I stayed silent because I knew the truth didn't need my voice to survive." Daniel swallowed hard. "That's exactly why I failed you," he said. "I should have acted sooner. I should have seen it." She shook her head gently. "You saw it when it mattered," she said. "And you chose right. That forgiveness, simple and unearned, cut deeper than anger ever could." Daniel made another decision that morning. He called the entire household together. Staff gathered in the main hall, uncertain, whispering among themselves. Amara stood quietly at the back, hands folded, unsure why she had been summoned. Daniel stepped forward. "What happened yesterday," he began, "was unacceptable." The room stilled. "No one in this house is above the law of respect," he continued. "Not guests, not family, not wealth." He turned slightly toward Amara. "Integrity was tested," he said, "and it stood firm." Some staff shifted uncomfortably. "I will be very clear," Daniel said. "Anyone who disrespects another person here because of background, position, or poverty will no longer work in this house." Silence followed. "This house will not protect cruelty," he concluded. "It will protect truth." Amara felt something unfamiliar settle in her chest. Relief, not triumph, not pride. Relief. Later that day, Kola found her in the garden. "I heard what Daniel did," he said quietly. She nodded. "He spoke well." "You held yourself well," Kola replied. "That's harder." She smiled faintly. "I've had a lot of practice." Kola hesitated, then spoke again. "Lydia won't stop easily, I know," Amara said calmly. "But I won't shrink for her." That afternoon, word of Lydia's final dismissal spread beyond the house. Friends called, family questioned. Some praised Daniel's courage, others criticized his judgment. Daniel listened to none of it. For the first time in his life, he was not interested in managing perception. He was interested in correcting harm. That evening, he found Amara studying at the dining table, books spread out in careful order. "You didn't have to stay today," he said. "I wanted to," she replied. "Routine helps." He nodded, then hesitated. "There's something else," he said. She looked up. "I've arranged counseling support for the staff," Daniel continued. "And conflict training. What happened exposed things I can't ignore anymore." Amara studied him. "You're changing the system," she said. "I'm trying," he replied. "Because protecting one person is not enough. The system that allowed it must change too." She closed her book slowly. "That matters more than you know." That night, Amara returned home to her family. Mama and Kiru listened quietly as Amara recounted what had happened. Not the slap, but the response, the meeting, the apology, the boundaries. Her mother nodded thoughtfully. "Justice doesn't always roar," she said. "Sometimes it stands quietly and refuses to move." Zara looked up. "Does that mean you're safe now?" Amara smiled and pulled her sister close. "It means I'm not alone." As days passed, the atmosphere in the mansion continued to shift. Staff spoke more freely. Tasks were shared more fairly. Amara noticed fewer watchful eyes, fewer whispered judgments. Not because she had been elevated, but because truth had been acknowledged. One evening, Daniel stood alone at the window again, watching the city lights. This time, his thoughts were clearer. He had always believed leadership meant control. Now he understood something else. Leadership meant accountability, and Amara, through her silence, her honesty, her refusal to be shaped by cruelty, had forced him to confront a version of himself he could no longer ignore. She had not demanded justice. She had revealed it. And that made all the difference. After the house meeting, life did not suddenly become perfect. But it became honest. For Amara, that honesty felt both comforting and unsettling. The tension that once lived in every corridor had eased, yet something new had taken its place, an awareness she could no longer ignore. She was seen now. Not watched, not judged, but noticed. And being noticed was unfamiliar territory. She kept her routine strict. Work during the day, classes in the evening, family every chance she got. Structure helped her keep her emotions in order. She had learned long ago that feelings, when left unchecked, could become distractions or worse, liabilities. But feelings had a way of growing quietly. Daniel, too, was changing. He no longer buried himself in work until midnight. He paid attention to conversations, to silences, to the people around him. And often, without intending to, his attention found Amara. It was in the way she read while waiting for water to boil, in how she corrected staff gently without asserting authority, in how she spoke to Zara on the phone, her voice softening instantly. None of it was dramatic, and that was what made it dangerous. One evening, Daniel returned home earlier than usual. He found Amara in the library, surrounded by books. She was so focused she didn't hear him enter. "What are you studying today?" he asked. She looked up, startled, then relaxed. "Social policy," she replied. "How early intervention changes outcomes for low-income families." He nodded, impressed. "You plan far ahead." She smiled slightly. "I plan necessary." He sat across from her, careful to keep distance. "Do you ever get tired?" he asked. "All the time," she admitted. "But tiredness passes. Regret stays." That answer lingered in the room between them. Over the next weeks, their conversations became more frequent but never crossed into intimacy. They spoke about books, about the city, about responsibility. Daniel listened more than he talked, something he was not used to. Kola noticed it too. One afternoon, he joined Daniel on the balcony. "You're quiet again," Kola said. Daniel smiled faintly. "You keep saying that." "It's because it keeps being true," Kola replied. "You're thinking about her." Daniel didn't deny it. "I'm trying not to," he said honestly. Kola studied him carefully. "Why? Because of power," Daniel replied. "Because of imbalance. Because I don't want her to feel like she owes me anything." Kola nodded slowly. "She wouldn't," he said. "That's what scares you." Daniel exhaled. "Yes." Meanwhile, Amara was fighting her own quiet battle. She noticed the way Daniel looked at her, not possessive, not demanding, but thoughtful. And that look stirred something she had kept locked away for years. Hope. She tried to ignore it. Hope was dangerous for people like her. Hope could distract you from survival. Hope could make you careless. One night after a long day, she stayed back in the kitchen longer than necessary. Daniel entered quietly. "You should rest," he said. "So should you," she replied. They stood there, the air thick with words neither was ready to speak. Amara, Daniel began, then stopped. She turned to him, waiting. "I don't want to confuse things," he said slowly, "but I want to be honest." Her heart raced, but she kept her expression calm. "Honesty is always safer," she said. He nodded. "I care about you," he said. "Not as someone who works for me, not as a project, as a person." Silence followed. Amara closed her eyes briefly, grounding herself. "I care about you too," she admitted softly. "But care doesn't always mean readiness." Daniel respected that. "I know," he said. "I don't want to rush anything." Across the room, Kola watched the two of them through the glass door, understanding settling heavily in his chest. He had already stepped aside emotionally, but seeing the connection confirmed what he had long suspected. Later that night, Kola knocked on Amara's door. "Can we talk?" he asked. She nodded. "I want you to know," Kola said carefully, "that whatever happens between you and Daniel, I'm not standing in the way." Amara looked at him with gratitude. "You've always respected my choices," she said. "That means more to me than you know." He smiled. "Just don't disappear on us, I won't," she promised. Days turned into weeks, and the quiet bond between Amara and Daniel deepened not through touch but through trust, through consistency, through restraint. They shared laughter, now small and unguarded, shared silences that no longer felt heavy, shared moments of understanding without explanation. One evening, Daniel walked Amara to the gate as she prepared to leave. "You've changed this place," he said. She shook her head. "I only showed what was already broken, and what was already possible," he added. She met his gaze, something unspoken passing between them. At home, Mama and Kiru noticed the shift immediately. "You smile differently," she said. Amara laughed softly. "Do I? Yes," her mother replied, like someone who is learning to hope carefully. Amara sat beside her. "I don't want to lose myself," she said. "You won't," Mama and Kiru said firmly. "Anyone worth loving will protect who you are, not replace it." Those words stayed with Amara. As she lay awake that night staring at the ceiling, she allowed herself one small truth. Her heart was no longer closed. It was cautious. It was healing. And it was beginning slowly, carefully to choose. If there was one thing Amara had learned since entering Daniel's world, it was this: not all kindness announced itself. Some kindness moved quietly, choosing impact over recognition. Kola had always been observant, but after the night he spoke with Amara about Daniel, his attention shifted in a different direction. He began to notice the small details. She never spoke about the way she declined offers for rides home, how she always left early on weekends, how her shoes wore down faster than they should. One evening, curiosity finally overcame restraint. Kola followed at a distance. He did not rush. He did not intrude. He simply watched as Amara left the mansion, boarded a crowded bus, then walked several streets on foot. When she finally stopped, his chest tightened. The building in front of her was unfinished, bare concrete walls, exposed iron rods, windows without glass, the kind of structure meant to be abandoned, not lived in. Amara slipped inside. Kola stayed in his car for a long time, staring at the place where dignity and hardship collided so plainly. He understood then why Amara carried herself the way she did, why she refused pity, why she guarded her independence so fiercely. That night, Kola could not sleep. He thought of Mama and Kiru aging too fast under worry. He thought of Zara, bright and hopeful, standing at the edge of opportunity. And he thought of Amara, working endlessly, refusing to bend, refusing to complain. He made a decision without telling anyone. Over the next few weeks, Kola moved carefully. He did not involve Daniel. He did not consult lawyers or assistants. He wanted no misunderstandings, no sense of obligation. What he planned was not charity, it was correction. Using his own funds, he secured a modest apartment not far from Zara's school. Nothing extravagant, just safe, solid walls, proper doors, a roof that did not leak, clean water, electricity that worked. He furnished it: simply beds, a table, chairs, curtains. A place that felt like dignity, not display. When everything was ready, he invited Amara to meet him after work. "I need you to come with me," he said. She frowned slightly. "Where you'll see." She hesitated, then agreed. When they arrived, Amara stared at the building in confusion. "Kola, why are we here?" He stepped aside and opened the door. "Go in." Amara entered slowly. The moment she saw the clean walls, the tiled floor, the sunlight filling the room, her breath caught. Her fingers trembled as she touched the edge of the table, the curtains, the door frame. This isn't, her voice broke. This isn't possible. Mama Nkiru stepped in behind her eyes widening. She covered her mouth with her hand, tears streaming freely. God, she whispered. Zara ran through the rooms laughing, touching everything as if afraid it might disappear. We have a real house, she cried. Sister, we have a real house. Amara turned to Kola, her eyes full. I can't accept this, she said, though her voice shook. It's too much. Kola shook his head gently. This isn't a gift, he said. It's a foundation. You've carried your family long enough. Let the ground hold you now. Mama Nkiru approached him slowly and placed her hand on his shoulder. My son, she said softly, you have done what no one else saw. May God bless you. Kola swallowed emotion, tightening his throat. As he turned to leave, Amara stopped him. You didn't have to do this, she said. I know, he replied. That's why I did. He walked away without looking back. That evening, Amara sat on the floor of the new apartment with her family, surrounded by silence that no longer felt empty. It felt safe. But her heart was heavy with gratitude and with truth. The next day, she asked Daniel to speak with her. They sat in the living room, sunlight streaming through tall windows. There's something I need to tell you, she said. Daniel nodded. Go ahead. Kola helped my family, she continued. He found us a home. Daniel absorbed this quietly. I didn't know, he said. He didn't want you to, Amara replied. And I need you to understand something else. She took a breath. My gratitude to him is deep. But my heart. She paused. My heart chose differently. Daniel's chest tightened, but he remained still. I don't want secrets between us, she said. Or confusion. Daniel nodded slowly. Thank you for telling me, he said. And thank you for being honest with everyone. That night, Daniel spoke to Kola. You didn't tell me, Daniel said, not accusing, just stating. Kola smiled faintly. It wasn't for you. Daniel studied him, then nodded. You did a good thing. I did the right thing, Kola replied. There's a difference. As time passed, the new apartment changed everything for Amara's family. Mama and Kiru slept better. Zara studied with focus and excitement. Laughter returned, not loud, not forced, but real. And Amara felt something unfamiliar. Stability, not dependence. Stability. She continued working, continued studying, continued building her future piece by piece. But now she did so without the constant fear of collapse. One evening, as she sat on the balcony of the apartment, Daniel joined her. You didn't tell me how bad it was, he said gently. I didn't want sympathy, she replied. I wanted a chance. You earned more than that, he said. She smiled softly. I'm learning to receive without losing myself. He met her gaze. And I'm learning to give without controlling. They sat in silence, the city humming below them. For the first time, Amara allowed herself to believe something new. That kindness could exist without strings. That support did not always demand surrender. That some people helped not to own, but to see you stand. And in that quiet understanding, her gratitude transformed into something deeper. Not obligation, but trust. Change had settled into Amara's life like a cautious guest present, respectful, never overwhelming. With her family now safe in their new apartment, the constant weight she had carried for years began to lift. Not all at once. Slowly, carefully. She still woke before dawn, still planned every expense, still guarded her heart, but the fear that once shaped every decision no longer ruled her days. And with that space came clarity. Daniel noticed it immediately. Amara moved differently now, still humble, still grounded, but no longer bracing for collapse. Her laughter came easier. Her silences felt peaceful instead of defensive. She no longer spoke as someone preparing for loss. For Daniel, that change brought both relief and urgency. He had waited. He had respected distance. He had told himself that patience was the most honest way forward. But watching Amara rebuild her life without depending on him forced him to confront a truth he could no longer avoid. If he did not speak now, he might lose her not to another man but to timing. One evening, Daniel asked Amara to stay behind after dinner. "Just for a moment," he said. She nodded, sensing the shift in his tone. They sat in the living room, the lights low, the city's noise distant. For once, there were no tasks waiting, no roles to perform. Amara, Daniel began, his voice quieter than usual. "I've spent months trying to do this the right way." She met his gaze, attentive. "I didn't want power to confuse intention," he continued, "or generosity to blur choice." She nodded slowly. "I understand. But there's something I can't keep silent about anymore," he said. Her heart quickened, but she did not interrupt. "I care for you," Daniel said, "deeply. Not because of your past, not because of your struggles, but because of your strength, your honesty, and the way you refuse to become smaller even when the world expects you to." Silence followed, not heavy but fragile. Amara looked down at her hands. "Daniel," she said carefully, "if we cross this line, everything changes." "I know," he replied. "And if you say no, I will accept it." She breathed in slowly. "I've spent my whole life surviving," she said. "Love has always felt like a luxury meant for other people." Daniel leaned forward slightly but did not touch her. "I don't want to rescue you," he said. "And I don't want to be your escape. I want to walk beside you only if you choose it." She lifted her eyes to his. "And if the world turns against us," she asked. "Then we face it honestly," he replied. Together, Amara sat quietly, her thoughts moving like waves. She thought of the streets, of the unfinished house, of nights filled with fear and responsibility, of how she had learned to trust only herself. And she thought of the man in front of her, not flawless, not heroic, but accountable. "I don't want to lose who I am," she said. "You won't," Daniel replied. "I would never ask you to." The truth settled gently between them. "I care about you too," Amara said at last. "But I need to choose this freely, not from gratitude, not from safety, from certainty." Daniel nodded. "Take your time," he said. "I'm not going anywhere." That night, Amara returned home restless. Mama Nkiru noticed immediately. "You're quiet," her mother said. Amara smiled faintly. "I'm thinking." Mama Nkiru sat beside her. "When a good thing arrives," she said, "it doesn't rush you. It waits." Amara leaned against her. "I'm afraid," she admitted. "Not of him. Of hope." Mama Nkiru held her hand. "Hope doesn't weaken strong people," she said. "It reveals them." The next day, Amara went about her routine as usual, but her thoughts stayed anchored to one question. Was she ready to stop guarding her heart? That evening, she asked Daniel to walk with her. They strolled through the garden as the sky deepened into dusk. Neither spoke at first. "I've been thinking," Amara said finally. Daniel waited. "For a long time, I believed love meant dependence," she continued. "That if I allowed it, I would lose control of my life." Daniel listened carefully. "But you never tried to own me," she said. "You never asked me to shrink." She stopped walking and turned to face him. "If we do this," she said, "we do it as equals." Daniel smiled, not triumphant, not relieved, but grateful. "Always," he said. Amara took a breath. "Then I choose you." The words were simple, but they carried years of restraint, courage, and trust. Daniel did not rush forward. He did not pull her close. He simply nodded, his eyes shining. "Thank you," he said, "for choosing freely." They stood there, the moment unfolding without spectacle. Inside the house, Kola watched from the window. He knew. Later that night, he found Daniel alone. "You look lighter," Kola said. Daniel smiled. "I am." Kola nodded. "She chose you." "Yes." Kola took a breath. "Then I'm happy." Daniel studied his friend. "You always were," he said, "even when it hurt." Kola shrugged. "Love that demands ownership isn't love." As weeks passed, Amara and Daniel moved forward carefully. No public displays, no announcements. Just shared time, honest conversations, and mutual respect. And when whispers returned as they always did, Amara stood steady. She had not been chosen because she was poor. She had not been elevated because she was lucky. She had chosen love without surrender. And Daniel had chosen partnership without control. Together they were not escaping the world. They were entering it truthfully. Love did not arrive in Amara's life with fireworks. It arrived with steadiness. After the night she chose Daniel, nothing dramatic changed on the surface. There were no sudden announcements, no extravagant gestures meant to silence gossip. Instead, there was consistency, quiet mornings, honest conversations, and a growing sense of partnership that did not need witnesses to feel real. Daniel was careful. He did not rush her. He did not parade their relationship as proof of victory or transformation. He understood perhaps better than ever that Amara's strength had been built in silence, and it deserved the same respect. For Amara, choosing Daniel did not mean abandoning her discipline. She continued her studies with the same intensity. She continued supporting her family. She continued insisting on boundaries at work, in public, and even in love. That was what made their relationship different. One evening, months later, Daniel visited Amara's family apartment for the first time. Mama and Kiru had prepared a simple meal. Nothing elaborate. Food that spoke of warmth rather than wealth. Zara hovered nearby, trying to hide her excitement. Daniel removed his jacket and greeted Mama and Kiru respectfully. "Thank you for welcoming me," he said. Mama Ankiru studied him for a long moment before smiling. "You came with humility," she said. "That tells me more than money ever could." They ate together, sharing stories. Daniel listened more than he spoke. He did not perform generosity. He asked questions about Zara's school, about Amara's childhood, about Mama and Kiru's hopes. When the meal ended, Daniel stood. "I didn't come only to eat," he said. Amara felt her heart tighten, not with fear, but with recognition. Daniel turned to Mama and Kiru. "I care deeply for your daughter," he said, "and I want to ask for your blessing." Mama and Kiru looked at Amara, then back at Daniel. "Do you see her?" she asked quietly. "Yes," Daniel replied without hesitation. "As she is." Mama and Kiru nodded. "Then you may proceed." Daniel turned to Amara, lowered himself slowly, and knelt. The room went still. "Amara Okoye," he said, his voice steady. "You walked into my life without asking for anything and changed everything by being yourself. I don't want to live another chapter without you choosing me every day. Will you marry me?" Tears filled Amara's eyes, not from surprise, but from recognition. This was not rescue. This was invitation. She looked at her mother, at Zara, who was already smiling through tears. "Yes," Amara said softly. "I will." Zara clapped her hands and laughed. Mama and Kiru closed her eyes in gratitude. The engagement did not become a spectacle. There were no press releases, no staged photos, just quiet joy shared among people who mattered. When news eventually reached the outside world, reactions were mixed. Some praised the story as inspiring, others questioned it. Some reduced Amara to a symbol, a poor girl saved by a rich man. Amara refused that narrative. She continued attending classes, continued working in community programs, continued correcting people when they spoke of her as though she had been lifted rather than risen. "I wasn't chosen because I was poor," she said once. and I wasn't loved because I needed saving. Daniel supported her fully. Their wedding was planned carefully, simple, intentional, and inclusive. On the day itself, the ceremony took place in a modest hall filled with warm light and fresh flowers. Not excessive, not performative, just meaningful. Amara walked down the aisle wearing a simple white dress, elegant in its restraint. As she stepped forward, memories washed over her, the streets, the sunburned days, the unfinished house, the fear of not being enough. But she had been enough. Always. Daniel waited at the front, his eyes filled not with pride but with gratitude. When they exchanged vows, there were no grand promises of wealth or protection. Only truth. "I promise to respect who you are," Daniel said, "and to walk beside you, never ahead of you." "I promise to choose you freely," Amara replied, "and to never lose myself in love." When the officiant declared them married, the room filled with quiet applause, not loud, not forced, but sincere. At the reception, Kola approached them smiling. "You did it," he said. "We did," Daniel replied. Kola turned to Amara. "You taught us all something," she smiled. "So did you." As the evening continued, Amara stood for a moment away from the crowd, watching laughter ripple through the room. She thought of the girl who once slept under a leaking roof, who sold bananas in the heat, who promised her sister a future she could not yet see. That girl had kept her word. Later that night, as Daniel held her hand, Amara understood something clearly for the first time. Her life had not changed because she met a billionaire. It had changed because she never abandoned her integrity. Wealth had opened doors. Love had offered companionship, but dignity had carried her through every threshold. And as she stepped into this new chapter, not as someone rescued, but as someone chosen, Amara Okoye knew her story was not about luck. It was about truth, endurance, and the quiet power of refusing to become small. This story reminds us that true transformation does not begin with money, status, or opportunity. It begins with character. Amara's life did not change because she met a powerful man. It changed because even in hunger and humiliation, she refused to trade her integrity for survival. She worked when it was easier to beg. She stayed silent when anger would have been justified, and she chose honesty when shortcuts were everywhere. In a world that often rewards noise, greed, and appearance, Amara teaches us that quiet dignity still has power. Not the kind of power that dominates others, but the kind that reshapes hearts, exposes injustice, and invites real change. Daniel did not fall in love with poverty, nor did he rescue a helpless woman. He was drawn to strength, to self-respect, to a woman who stood whole even when the world tried to break her. This is the deeper lesson. Love that heals does not come to save you. It comes to walk with you. And the right opportunities do not erase who you are. They reveal it. If this story touched you, take a moment to reflect. Have you ever been judged by where you came from instead of who you are? Or witnessed kindness and integrity change a situation that seemed hopeless? Share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us where you're watching from and what time it is in your country. And if stories like this inspire you, encourage you, or remind you of your own worth, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next one. Your support helps keep stories of hope, justice, and dignity alive.